When we balance equations, we need to think carefully about the definition of an equation, where we have or show that one thing is equivalent to another. Now, with this, we also need to think about a physical representation of a weighing scale, where you've got weight of something which is equivalent to the weight of another, which allows the scales themselves to balance. So, if they are indeed balanced or empty, if you add an amount or weight to one side, then you must also do the exact same thing with the amount of value that you add to the other side. So if you also half what is on one side, you've also got to half what is on the other side, or multiply. So if you put 5 times as much stuff in one side of the equation, you must also put 5 times as much stuff in the other side for it to balance. If you don't, it'll be lopsided and it'll fall to one side. So we need to address each side of the equation in turn and make sure that what we do to one side, we do to the other side, so it does not affect the balance. Let's look at question A here and think about how we will use this to actually balance out this first part here. Can I get rid of this? No worries. Alright, so I'm going to first of all look and try to identify the lowest terms. There's 4 terms in this, but it's a good idea to work and try to use the lowest terms. This way we have less negative values to worry about, and you're going to see why later on. It's crucial to look out for the negative values. So I'm going to look at 3x because it's lower than 4. So I'm going to cancel it out. I'm looking at this and seeing that it's positive, and I can cancel it out by subtracting a 3x from this side. That is going to be the negative equivalent to 3x. And because I've done it to one side, I also need to do it to the other side, so subtract 3x. So now I can see that if I take 3x from this side, these two resolve to become just 4x plus 4 is equal to, and if you look at these two carefully, plus 3x and minus 3x, they are just 0, they are nothing, they cancel each other out, leaving with just 24. Now, if I now look for the lowest term here, is 24. It's also a very good idea that this happens to be 24, or the lowest term, because if I try to subtract or eliminate this, I'll end up with 0 in this side, and something which is a little bit more complicated in this side here. Now, just to illustrate what would happen, it doesn't actually matter which side you eliminate as long as your equation becomes simpler, but avoid this if you can. It is not wrong, but it's something that you might want to look out for. So if I subtract 24 from here and subtract 24 from here, what I actually end up with is going to be 4x, and 4 minus 24 is actually going to be minus 20, and these two are nothing because they resolve to 0. Now, because there's still 3 terms in this process or this step in the equation, you actually haven't simplified, so it's not going to be the wisest choice. A wiser choice would have been to go for that 4. So let's go back and do that. Here I'm going to do minus 4 to the left hand side and minus 4 to the right hand side of this equation, and notice what happens here now. 4x and these two would be 0, so they're nothing. You got 24 minus 4 is just 20. Now 4 somethings is equal to 20. If I want to find out what one of those things are, I simply need to divide them by 4, and I need to do the same thing to both sides of the equation so they're still equivalent and still balanced, and I get just one of these x's, and 20 divided by 4 is just 5. So I've solved my equation. I know one of these x's is just 5. The second example, you might find this a little bit more difficult, but you might want to try it before we go for it, so you might want to pause the video here and give it a go. Right, looking at this equation here, I can see that the lowest term isn't 2x, but it's minus 40. Minus 40 is far lower than 2x, and even minus 15. So I'm going to look to eliminate that from both sides and watch what happens. So I'm actually going to add 40 because I want it to resolve to 0 to both sides, so it still balances. And this is what I get. I get 7x plus 25 is equal to 2x, and these two 40s have already cancelled each other out. The next part is crucial. Now I can see the next lowest term is 2x, but it's not always about cancelling the next lowest term, but more about trying to eliminate terms to make it more simpler. Alright, so if I want to, I could have subtracted 2x from this side and subtracted 2x from this side, and watch what happens here. I end up with 5x plus 25 is equal to 0, and I can still work with this, giving me a choice to now eliminate one of these two. I can't eliminate 0 because it's neither negative or positive, but I can choose to eliminate the 5x, but watch what happens. So take away 5x, take away 5x, and now I have 25 is equal to minus 5x. Alright, and going forward from there, I've got a situation where x, which I want, is attached to this negative 5. So I could do something which is going to take 2 stages to do, but it will still work. But it is the long way around. So we're going to go for it again just to humor you and see what happens. So I decide to add 5x here, add 5x here. Now I'm taking everything back to where it was. And notice it's just like this. And end up with my 5x plus 25 is equal to 0. And then I'm going to minus 25 here, and minus 25 here. And I get my 5x is equal to 25 minus 25 this time. 0 minus 25 is minus 25. Now notice here was inefficiency because we selected something which was wrong. Alright, we've actually gone backwards, but it isn't necessarily wrong as long as you recognize the right steps are to kind of manipulate it so that you are eliminating downwards. Alright, so now we have 2 terms as opposed to the 3 up here, the 0, the 25 and 5x. We can go further and say 5x is equal to 25. We can say divide by 5, find out what one of those is, and I get x is equal to minus 25 over 5. Now, if that was 25 over 5, everyone can know the answer very easily, but we're now dividing a negative number by a positive number. Straight away, we should know the answer is negative, and 5 divided by 5, 25 divided by 5 is just 5. Alright, now that's with us not being too efficient. We could be far more efficient with our balancing by trying to think about leaving our unknowns on one side and then our knowns, our constants on the other, so it's easier to work through. So let's look at a much quicker way of doing this. Now I've got 2 terms on this side and 1 on this side. I'm trying to figure out what x is. So it would be a good idea if I put all the unknowns on one side and knowns on the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this 7 to join this 2 because they're part of the unknown. So I'm going to minus 7x from this side and minus 7x on this side. That leaves me with 25 is equal to minus 5x, similar to what we had before. Now this is another situation you might have, and notice now x is being multiplied by minus 5. If you've got 5 something, it's easy to divide by 5 to find out what one of the things is, but you can actually do the same here as well. You can divide by minus 5, and you can actually say minus divide by minus 5 to get what one of these things is, one of these x's, and divide by minus 5. Remember, you have to do both sides, and that actually leaves me with the equation where I have to go to 25 divided by minus 5. Again, something that you might look at and say that's quite tricky, but remembering that you can only produce a negative product or quotient or value when you are multiplying and dividing 2 numbers where one is negative and the other is positive. Alright, so let's say 25 divided by 5. We know that's just 5. One is negative, one is positive, so it's definitely going to be negative 5 and it's equal. Now notice we've got minus 5 divided by minus 5. 5 divided by 5 is just 1. Negative divided by negative is going to be a positive. So it's just 1x or just x. And all you could notice that these 2 will just cancel each other out. I'm going to give you one more to try and see if you can get this done before we come back to class. Now this isn't going to be a whole number answer, but let's see if you can get the closest. So let's try this one. Minus 13x plus 40 equals 4x minus 9. Alright, try to leave your answer as a fraction as opposed to a decimal number if you can. Good luck.